This is all things voluntary, and in light of the recent tornado tragedy here in Oklahoma, I wanted to do a video touching on the commonly held belief that so-called price gouging in the wake of a disaster is wrong or harmful. You might think I'm only going to give a calculated economic account of price gouging using Moore, Oklahoma as a backdrop, but I actually consider the Oklahoma City area to be my home. I grew up here, and I had even lived very close to where the recent tornado ripped through, causing billions of dollars worth of damage and even claiming lives. I want the victims of this tragedy to be able to rebuild their lives as much as anyone else who calls this place home. And that is, in part, why I believe so strongly in sound economics. To start off the discussion, I wanted to explain the concept of scarcity. Resources are scarce. This is simply a matter of fact. It is a reality that human beings have always had to cope with. It is the process of economics to make scarcity less and less painful to the point that it only becomes a passing nuisance. In fact, in modern times, where economies are largely free, we are not especially accustomed to dealing with profound scarcity. When we flip the light switch, the lights come on. When we turn on the faucet, clean water flows. When we drive into a gas station, there's always fuel to be pumped. In stores and malls and warehouses, there are clothes and shoes and food and gadgets and luxuries beyond imagination. But even in this world of plenty, as it seems, we still interact through a price system because all of these goods are still ultimately scarce. What this means is that at any given time there is not enough of a particular good to satisfy every possible desire for it. We must allocate resources rationally, and prices are the best way to do it. Prices arise when buyers and sellers agree to trade a unit of exchange, like money, for a particular good or service in a market where competitors may be present to provide similar goods and services. Prices give us a continuously updating reflection of how greatly a particular good or service is desired relative to its availability. Prices are important because they keep us accountable to our present reality. Prices let us know when things are plentiful enough to consume, and they reward us when we produce certain things that people need. Whenever a disaster strikes, and particular resources like clothing, shoes, food, or clean water become scarce, the need for them that people experience undoubtedly goes up as supplies dwindle. When prices are allowed to work, it's reasonable to expect that the most valuable things in the wake of the disaster will greatly increase in price relative to what people are used to paying under normal circumstances. This is simply a product of how individual sellers react to dramatic increases in demand for their products. In a functional economy, a true market economy, anyone in the area who is capable of producing or bringing in more of those necessary supplies stands to be greatly rewarded. If demand escalates for bottled water, construction materials, carpentry services, or electrician skills, prices rise, and it begins to make sense for vendors, electricians, and carpenters to bring their goods and services into the area, even if they have to leave other areas, if only for the chance to make better money. This functions no differently than under normal circumstances when market researchers decide to sell in certain areas to meet demand. Emergencies are just an example of an amplified effect. On the other side of higher prices, everyone who needs these resources are encouraged by how costly they are to find ways to use them as wisely as possible, at least until new supplies arrive. For instance, water goes exclusively to drinking and not to watering lawns. Gasoline goes to rescue vehicles and not for leisure drives. Hotel rooms goes to displaced families and not casual travelers. Both sides of this coin actually induce disaster relief by reducing overconsumption and encouraging more supply. However, most people in wealthy economies are not accustomed to dealing with the idea that food, water, and shelter might actually be hard to come by. So there tends to be a strong negative reaction to the idea that prices might increase in response to real scarcity. The underlying assumption is that the high prices are the only things preventing them from getting what they need, which is not entirely true. Sadly, the real reason prices rise after disasters is precisely because of something they never expected. There simply isn't enough stuff. Oftentimes, there is a call for legislation to prohibit what is called price gouging. Because price gouging is often condemned in a world where things are expected to be plentiful, it is often a very easy political sell. Force prices down, and as if by magic, everything is plentiful again. However, the stroke of a legislator's pen simply cannot alleviate the scarcity in the real world that is only being reflected in prices. However popular anti-price gouging laws might be, the only people who benefit are those who are first to buy up the remaining scarce resources that are priced artificially low. It is often believed that even if price gouging is economically efficient, it is still unethical for a seller of goods to be so stingy in the wake of the tragedy. This asserts that the only proper way to distribute resources after a disaster is by essentially giving them away for less than they're worth. However, it must be acknowledged that no one is ever under moral compulsion to do something against his will. If a homeowner refuses to lend a spare bedroom to a stranger, he is doing nothing wrong. In effect, he can charge an infinite price for the rent of that spare bedroom. It is perfectly within his right and the right of any property owner to offer to sell his wares or rent his bedroom at any price which he is willing to accept. And we have to remember that sellers of goods always have the option not to sell. They could keep the scarce resources for themselves and use them instead of selling them. Higher prices during a disaster encourage sellers to instead trade their wares with people who might need them more. And even if a seller of goods decided to sell what they had at prices representative of conditions before the disaster, that is, lower than they really should be at the present, the first people to get those resources might actually be the ones to turn around and sell them at the very high prices they actually should be. If a buyer chooses to accept the offer of a seller, he has only demonstrated that his need is greater than the cost. Let me emphasize that every voluntary interaction necessarily makes both parties better off. As long as everyone involved is not coerced into buying or selling, there is nothing morally wrong with the transaction, regardless of the price. Don't get me wrong, there is a place for charity, and a very important one. Indeed, when disasters are especially local, it remains possible for people in nearby areas to bring sufficiently plentiful resources into the area where need is more deeply felt. It is actually due to the generosity of people in neighboring areas bringing in water and clothing and food and gasoline for free in most cases that prices actually stay down during most localized disasters in wealthy countries. But charity has its limitations. Tornado survivors have received more of some resources than they could ever use and are still in need of other resources. Charity is good, but it just can't match the power of prices in terms of meeting people's most immediate needs. This is why, in the general scheme of things, the ability of prices to reflect present realities is absolutely critical. Anti-price gouging laws effectively make it illegal to sell products at their market price if that price is above an arbitrary maximum. Can anyone really explain how making it illegal to sell things under certain arbitrary conditions could ever really make people better off? I say arbitrary because there is no reason that a particular price should always be the same. The function of prices is to reflect the state of the good's scarcity relative to how greatly it is needed in the pulse of the present, not the now irrelevant past. On Sunday, May 19th, Moore, Oklahoma had running water in every home. bottled water was not a particularly scarce commodity. By Monday the 20th, everything had changed. Prices, the most critical signal a disaster-torn area can send to the rest of the world, must be allowed to reflect this new reality, no matter how uncomfortable or how foreign this reality might be. This has been All Things Voluntary. I really appreciate you listening.